Terje, number one, hello.
Hello, Andy.
Number two, am I saying your name right?
Yes, I'm quite surprised by your quality of pronunciation.
Oh, well, that's a good start. I've been practicing, but if I get it wrong, you have to forgive me. But
I'll scream. Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for coming to join us.
My pleasure.
And before we start chatting properly, so for those of you that are new to this gentleman, right, let me introduce you to this book, right? This is a short history of nearly everything paranormal, which is a chunky tome that I super recommend. Because, I mean, at the symposium, we have for years been trying to sort of include people with science and real reasoning behind why psychic phenomena and other related phenomena has a reality to it. And this book, if you get to the end of this book and you still don't think that, well, you never will. But, you know, without any dogma, without any forcing of making you think anything, you realize when you get to the end of 530 pages that there's a very serious case to be made. So first of all, Terje, congratulations.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks also for the nice introduction of the book.
No, not at all. And we're obviously going to talk about the themes of the book today. But before we do that, I thought, you know, it would just be really interesting to get a little bit of background on yourself. So now you are in Norway. Would you like to say anything about where you are?
Yes, I'm in a coastal town, a small town in Norway called Mandal. And as I told to Andy, that Norway is not just skiing and reindeers and polar bears and that, so I sent him some pictures. Could you show that?
Yes, let's do that. So hold on a minute. Let me just share the screen. And first of all, well, we're going to get a nice portrait shot to begin with.
Oh yeah, thank you.
So there we are. So we can see what you look like. Okay, let's have a look at where you live. And you say when you want to.
Yes, I'm not an experienced zoomer, so just yeah.
Okay, there we go.
That's the main beach in our town. It's called Sjøsand, means the sea sand, and the river there is some of the basis for, say, the livelihoods in the town with the timber and also salmon fishing and all that. And a bit outside here is a very, say, kind of famous harbor. Lots of English boats from old times went there, you know, to have a safe harbor for the winter storms before going to Sweden and Denmark. And so it was a very, say, I don't know what is it. It's a kind of hub for shipping and that kind of things. So that is, yes, say, the basic of the city, and it's very idyllic. And as you can see, we have one beach here, and it's
there we go. Yes, very idyllic.
Yes, and a Cuban friend of mine, he was here, and he said, just like in Cuba, only you have pine trees and we have palm trees. So that was the difference he felt. It's all was like the Caribbean during summertime. So I really love it here, really. So yes, and small town. Wooden buildings, not bricks and that kind of things, you know. So and also cobblestones, as you see in the streets, and so we like to keep the old city. And here we have the center of the old town. It's a piazza, you know, people sitting and eating, and lots of tourists, also from England and more from Germany, in fact. Yeah, so very cozy little southern town, as you see, and there's some industry in our new cultural this concert hall you can see here on the left. So yeah, so as I said, not only polar bears and reindeer.
Well, I hope the Norwegian Tourist Board are paying you for this, because you're doing a very you're doing a very good job. I want to go there.
Oh. You know, I've been living in the capital of Norway for 20 years. I was born here in Mandal, or very close, but after studying and, you know, having some stints in different institutions and museums and university in Oslo, I went back here to help my mother, who was becoming old. But you know, I'm not going back to Oslo after this. So yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, you're talking here about your earlier life and where you've come from. So I mean, what I'm really interested in before we come to the sort of the book is just have a little bit sort of background to, like, how did you become interested in psychic phenomena in the first place? I know that you say you've had some interesting experiences. So
yes,
where did this
well,
begin?
several kind of experiences really. I was part of a Christian youth club when I was young, and some of my trusted friends that told me about strange experiences. For instance, a friend of mine, she was going to the United States, and she had started to pray God to somehow make arrangement for that to happen. And suddenly she got the equivalent of 500 pounds on a check in the post, you know, and from out of nowhere. And it turned out it was from her brother who was living in the Philippines at the time, you know, but he was not aware of her wish to go to the United States, and that this is many years ago, and that the tickets would cost about say 500 pounds. So that kind of thing. Of course, she was a devout Christian, so she thought immediately, God himself has come somehow taken action here. But you know, that kind I will not say not to that, but you know, parapsychology would say that could be an example of telepathy, and lots of other kind of things. Also, my grandfather, he was able to hear my grandmother half an hour before she approached, before she was arriving at home. And if she was delayed for some reason, meeting some friends or some, say the auditive impression of her approaching home would also be delayed. So it became so regular for him. So when he heard the sounds of her in the alley and going up the stairs, he went to the stove to put on the dinner, you know, because he knew from experience then it would be about half an hour and then she would appear physically. So hearing events before they happen was quite, say, regular to him. And he was a very down-to-earth man. He was a mechanical engineer. So and never have been in any kind of religious or New Age connection at all. So when, as I said, trusted Christian friends and also my very down-to-earth family told me about such things, I could not just dismiss it. And later I went to Oslo to study, and I met some interesting people that seemingly had telepathic abilities. And when I started my academic, say, career, or what to call it, I got as mentor Norway's foremost expert on occult phenomena and traditions, Professor Jan Erik Ebstad Hansen. And he had lectures on Renaissance and Hermetism and anthroposophy and all that kind of Western esoteric traditions. And of course, in these traditions, psychic phenomena are quite integrated. It's not just some strange things, you know, you can cultivate these things, and masters of different kinds are said to possess quite a lot of competence in this field. So my mentor is he's not skeptic himself, and he believes, he told me himself, an event he was at a casino, and there was this roulette, and you know, it's 36 numbers, and the 37th is the 0. And suddenly his wife said, Jan Erik, put a coin, or what is called this jeton, on a certain number. I think it was 17. And he just did, and the roulette spun and stopped on 17. So they got 36 times the amount back that he had placed. And the roulette was to spin again, and she said, Jan Erik, place on number 3. And he placed on number 3, and brrrt, and roulette stopped on number 3. So they got 36 times back once more. And you know, if you add those numbers up, you got 36 times 36. It's about 960 or there around. I'm not the genius in you know, calculating, but very, very small chance. And then she said for the third time, Jan Erik, place on number 10. And he said, no, it will not work a third time. but the roulette spun, stopped, and number 10. So 3 times in a row, she was able to pinpoint what would be the right number. And he asked, how did he do this? And she said it was just like the field was somehow glowing. She could see a kind of light emanating from, say, the field where the little, you know, what is called the little metal ball was to stop. So the statistics for this was quite astounding, really. But he told me, as long as there is not a kind of comprehensive model to interpret these phenomena, it's not possible to somehow make any sense of them. So it will just be curious observation. Peter says that, Paul says that, and so we need a kind of comprehensive theory model for the field. And you know, in my little, not a little, a short story, or not so short story about everything paranormal, I suggest different models of consciousness that might help to make sense of these phenomena, with reference to quantum physics and laboratory research and different other kind of, as you said, scientific approaches to this field.
I mean, we're obviously going to come to that in this chat, but you've also studied, I think, is it Gestalt therapy and psychosynthesis? Can you explain a little bit about that and how you feel that's sort of come into your work as well?
Well, you know, that's part of a humanistic therapy. I studied at the Norwegian Gestalt Institute, and they have they was, say, disciples of the Fritz Perls say branch of Gestalt therapy, and he was, as you might know, this Esalen Institute in the United States, which has been a hatchery for all kind of alternative movements since the 60s, psychedelic therapy, shamanism, you know, ecstatic dancing, all that kind of, say, wanting to expand human potential movement. So the Gestalt therapy is not directly related to paranormal phenomena, but viewed in the perspective of that all these things are somehow functions of an expanded consciousness. Gestalt is, say, part of that bigger movement, human potential movement. Also psychosynthesis, that is say, a branch of psychotherapy developed by a Freud, what is called Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, had an Italian disciple called Roberto Assagioli. And Assagioli found that Freud was somehow useful, but he was limited. So Assagioli used esoteric Western tradition, the Kabbalah, for instance. I think he was Jewish himself, and also this Renaissance Hermetism and other esoteric traditions. And there, as we spoke of, the paranormal phenomena is so much more integrated than in common culture. So psychosynthesis is, say, quite close to this expanded consciousness that is somehow what is called, you have to presuppose to explain paranormal phenomena. And some of the, say, kind of experiences you do if you're doing these exercises in psychosynthesis may open you to say these kind of phenomena. You do fantasy travel journeys and all that kind of things, and you have your inner visions. You're going to a temple, you know, open the doors, speak to this wise old man or women, or that kind of what you normally would be part of esoteric or occult traditions, you know, making some kind of vessels for receiving information from this expanded field of consciousness. So psychosynthesis is somehow, even if not directly, so closely related to the paranormal.
Yeah, and I mean, what I find fascinating is you have got a background in all of this hermeticism as well. And I was really fascinated to see that I think you'd done the first Norwegian translation of the old Hebrew Book of Enoch. Now, if anybody doesn't know what the Book of Enoch, it's got stuff that's not really in the main Bible, or it expands on it, the Nephilim, the flood, talks about the Messiah. How did you come to be interested in the Book of Enoch?
I was studying Christianity when I was a young man. Also, I was studying a quite conservative theological faculty, and I found somehow that when Jesus used the expression "Son of Man," it was taken for granted that he was somehow referring directly to himself. But you know, I found that there were traditions that where the Son of Man was used not about Jesus, but about a heavenly being, a kind of God's right-hand man, helping him with this ultimate judgment. So it was not, say, a physical figure, it was a heavenly archangel, and that somehow puzzled and interested me quite a lot. So I felt somehow that, say, normal conservative Christianity was hiding something. And I read the Book of Enoch and also quite a lot around it, and the background from it in the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, the Merkaba mysticism from antiquity, and all that kind of, say, former traditions. So when I got the opportunity, I was asked from a quite prestigious series of books here in Norway called The Cultural Library to write about Martin Buber, the philosopher of dialogue, which is a very interesting and a very important philosopher for pedagogues and for psychotherapists. So I had studied this quite a lot of Jewish esotericism and philosophy. So I was asked from this cultural library to write about Martin Buber. And after I had done that, and they were quite happy with my essay, I asked, is it possible we could do something on the Book of Enoch? And there was a discussion with a quite an expert. He rather wanted to do some other book, but you know, I had taken on my best suit, which was English tweed and silken tie, you know, and I was, you know, posing as an important figure in the so, and I somehow managed to convince them that yes, we should do something about the Book of Enoch. And the problem with the Book of Enoch is really it's written in Ge'ez, which is old Ethiopian language. It's kind of Semitic language, but nobody except some Ethiopian priests and some theological scholars speaks Ge'ez. And in Norway, there are 4 persons that speaks or master Ge'ez. So I had to find one of those 4 people being willing to do this quite big task of translating. So I must correct a bit, because I did not do the translation, but I organized the translation, because I do not master Ge'ez. So I got this, and I wrote quite a substantial essay to open the book for, say, modern readers. And it has been used, you know, in curriculums and theological faculties here in Norway. And I think it was quite, we could deem it a success, I think.
Oh, fantastic. Before we go on, just to say, if anybody, by the way, watching has any questions that they want to raise later, there will be a Q&A time later. Do pop it in the Q&A box, better than the chat box. We might not see it, but if you put it in the Q&A box, and we will have a look at any questions or points later on. But so, Terje, I mean, you eventually come to write this enormous book here, which we've mentioned. Which what I think the gift of this is, there is so much in one source, because often it's very hard to get to all of this in one source.
Thank you.
What led you then to come to be writing about this, and going from the Book of Enoch and suddenly feeling that you had something to say about, you know, especially psychic phenomena? There's other stuff too, but especially that. Where did that come from, you know, in terms of writing a book this substantial?
Well, as I said, I mentioned some experience in my family and my friends, but I also got some experience myself, you know. When I was quite young, suddenly I was able to hear what people were about to say right before they said it, even if that specific word they were about to use had not been uttered earlier in the conversation. And that puzzled me. How did I know he was going to say just that, you know? And it was nothing dramatic, but that kind of experiences. And also I met, it was after there was what is called an op-ed in or kind of article in Norway's most serious daily newspaper, Aftenposten, meaning the Evening Post, and they had tried to test out psychics in Norway, and the journalist was mostly not impressed at all. Rather, he was rather dismissive. But there was one guy that impressed him. And because this guy told him that I can see you are about to go to travel, but you will visit those cities you have planned to visit in the opposite order and than what you have planned. And there will also be a priest contacting you, wanting to join you in this travel. And you will have very good use for this new camera you just have bought. And the journalist was stunned because, you know, he wrote this article after this, and it happened just like that. Because of some mix in the travel agency, he had to travel the opposite direction, and the priest appeared and asked if he could join him, and he had just bought this camera right before calling this psychic guy. So he somehow confessed to the authenticity of this guy's gifts. And that interested me. So I called this guy. He's an old traveler. Not the Roma people, but you know, those guys living mostly in camping wagons, or you know, having
travelers. Yeah.
Travelers. Yes, I think you have them in Britain also, and they have a strong culture for using psychic abilities. Probably it's because it's needed to survive, you know, because there have been lots of prejudices against them and all that kind of things. And I was going to a date the day after. So I asked him, can you tell me how will this date go? And he said, oh yeah, I can see she's like you quite a lot, and but you know, that's easy to say. And then he suddenly said, and I can also tell you, this woman is 1 meter and 64 centimeters tall. I don't know if you use the metric system in England, but you know, can you translate 1 meter and 64 centimeters for me?
More or less.
Yeah, okay.
Not off the top of my head, but we get the idea. Yes.
Yes. So to make it more available, and he on the inch, he said how tall this lady was, and I went to this date, and it was very nice, and we had a nice conversation and all. And you know, because I'm curious and I wanted to check out, I asked, by the way, how tall are you? And then she said 1 meter and 64 centimeters. At the inch, precisely what he had told me. So I was quite stunned by that. And how is it possible? I thought perhaps he just gave me some, say, average height of the Norwegian woman or something. I checked that in some, you know, matrix afterwards, but that was not correct. The say average woman is a bit taller than that. So he had not just given me the statistically most likely height. So I asked him, called him next day and said, how did you know? And he laughed and said, you know, if you asked him a question, it was just like searching on Google. You place a search word and then you get lots of information related more or less directly to the word you are, or the concept, or you know, the phrase you are searching for. But he was not able to control what would appear. So it could be the brother's occupation, it could be the color of the hair of the father, but for some reason that he did not know, the height of the woman appeared to him, and he just told me. And you know, that was fascinating to me. So I had to dig a bit deeper, and I said, okay, but how do you do this? And he said, I take it from you. And I didn't know how that was possible. He said, if you are a good channeler, I can do that. And you know, I was quite new to this at that time. And so okay, but can you read my mind? You're telling me? Yeah, probably I can do that. And he was then on holiday at the Canary Islands, you know, so we were speaking on the phone, and he was far off. And I live in an old house in Mandal, and it's not luxurious in any way, very scruffy, but it's a quite big, white, and in the middle it's a quite what you can say, it's standing out. It's a blue double door. So if you view the house from front on, you will see the White House and this quite shining blue door in the middle. So that is has a strong visual identity, to put it that way. So I told him, as I said, he was at the Canary Islands. As I said, now I will visualize my house, and please tell me, what do you see? And I started visualizing this White House with the blue double door. And he became silent some seconds, and then he said, I can see something white and I can see something blue. You know, and also blue doors are not very common in our, say, little town here. The traditional color on the old doors are green, so not blue. So how did he, you know, the chances, of course, not impossible, but, you know, first get the main color, and then he got this very characteristic blue door right. So after he have given me on the inch the height of the woman I was dating, and then could apparently tell me correctly the colors of my house, you know, that was a quite stunning demonstration to me. So then I started to study parapsychology and going into the scientific experiments and all that, because no, it was no more anecdotes. I had personal experience from this myself. And so long story short, one of my friends is an experienced psychotherapist, and at that time also my mother had just passed away, and I was kind of depressed, and I had not so much money, and I was wondering and writing a book, and he said, yes, you must write a book about this phenomena, because it will be very helpful for many people. Because he, as a therapist, he got people telling him about this, but he could only say, oh, that was a strange coincidence, and thinking perhaps, oh, my patient is a bit psychotic today or something like that. He felt that the framework that I then had laid out for him for this book was to be very helpful for also for say lay people and also for psychotherapists. So he has bought 3 books, copies of my book, and placed on his wall. So the young psychologist is to educate, are to educate themselves. So as I said, my own interest for it, and also the encouragements of an experienced psychotherapist was, say, what is called this drop that made the, you know, the glass flow over. So I felt I had to do something, say, concrete with all these ideas, and yeah.
What do you think in the book? What's the main thing that you want to get across to people?
That is quite simple. It's what I call the mental internet. That by habit, we tend to think that consciousness is something I have inside my head, or you have inside your head, or our viewers have inside their heads. But you know, if you think of your telephone or your PC, and so you know, if some person says internet is inside my phone, you know that's not the internet is the network between all the phones, all the tablets, all the PCs. And in a similar manner, I think it's much more constructive to somehow imagine consciousness not something being inside my head or your head or the viewer's head. It's more like a network that we are all connected to. And then suddenly a phenomenon, for instance, like telepathy, is not something that we say should be stunned about. It's something we rather should take as say for granted, really, because if we share this field of information, I can go to your Facebook site and see what you have posted there. And when I think, when I speak, when I imagine, when I feel, I'm constantly uploading things on the mental internet, this collective sphere of consciousness. And a sensitive person, what we call psychic, will be able to more or less correctly pick and download this information that I have uploaded. So as I said, this reformulation of consciousness, just as my old mentor said, unless there is some kind of new conception here, a new comprehensive idea that can give meaning to these phenomena, they will be somehow just anecdotes and stray observations. So the mental internet is my main idea here. And it's not, of course, a new idea. Carl Gustav Jung used the collective unconsciousness, and the old Vedanta Indian for 3,000 years ago, they also have this kind of collective consciousness. That consciousness is somehow the basic stuff of the universe. Consciousness is therefore ubiquitous. It's before matter, really. So this idea, but to make it easily accessible to modern folks, I use the metaphor of the internet, because we all have the experience daily, more or less, that we can transmit information to a friend in Australia, say, at a split second via the internet. And also that we can download information from say earlier generations or whatever matter we are interested in from this net. So also it gives so much meaning. For instance, Rupert Sheldrake, he has used kind of similar concept for to explain how evolution takes place. These morphic fields, information fields that are somehow expanded through the generations of the different species. So this to switch from consciousness being an individual thing to being a collective thing, working like somehow like a mental internet, that is the crux of the book, really.
I mean, you mentioned Jung there, and you mentioned Freud earlier. What I was impressed with was the amount of very well-known names that you wouldn't necessarily associate with an interest in psychic phenomena. Like Alan Turing is another one. And yes, it turns out they were very interested. So, I mean, would you like to say a little bit about that? And do you think that they kept it quiet because of their reputations, or, you know, was it kind of edited out? Or why do you think we don't hear more about this?
Yes, quite well. Yes, Sigmund Freud, he is very often quoted if you study psychology at university. Of course, even if people dismiss his theories today, he's still kind of the founding father of the field, really. So you have always to read some Freud to study psychology. And then concerning occult phenomena, he is very often quoted that it's important to stave off this mud of the occult, you know, becoming rational about all these things. And that is somehow there people stop, you know, and that's Freud's say opinion about these phenomena. But that's not true at all. He was honorary member of the SPR, Society of Psychic Research, both in and he was member both in England and in the United States. And he said at the end of his life that if he had the possibility to live once more, he would not use his life on psychoanalysis, but on psychic studies. So that is very strong statements from, say, the father of modern psychology. And his pupil, and as you said, it is the concept, what I call the emperor's wrath in my book. You know, if you challenge the authority, you will be, you know, you can be cancelled, you lose founding, you lose scholarship, you can, you know, be banned from your job or whatever. And as we know, Sigmund Freud was Jewish, and he had been denied career promotions on several occasions because of his Jewishness. So, and also his theory, psychoanalysis, you know, about the, say, potential sexual relationship between children and parents of the opposite sex, this Oedipus complex, had made him very controversial. So both being Jewish and talking dirty about, say, idyllic family life had made him, you know, a bit beyond the pale for many people already. And should he now also be, say, taken to be a spokesman for occultism? No, he couldn't accept that. So he told his pupil, please let us keep silent about all this. So it was especially a pupil called Ferenczi, a Hungarian pupil of his. Freud and Ferenczi had done experiments on telepathy that somehow was crucial in making him, say, believe in these phenomena. And then came other central pupil, Carl Gustav Jung, and he was a natural-born mystic that have these phenomena experienced themselves, many of them. If you read Jung's autobiography, you are quite stunned, overwhelmed by the vast number of phenomena Jung himself had experienced. So he was not reluctant to accept them because he had experienced so many of themselves, and he also researched at least 8 different psychic mediums, and his family, branches of his family, also did seances, spiritualist seances themselves, with quite stunning results, really. But also there we have this emperor's wrath, because even if Jung himself knew this, he kept his his calm and went to the conferences and did not speak about these things for quite a long time. Because he was afraid, or I will not say perhaps not afraid, but it was very impractical if he would be cancelled or banned for attending conferences because of his views on the paranormal. But later in life, he made some kind of bold statements, and as I said, especially his autobiography, there he shows his true flag, really. So yeah, and you also mentioned other Alan Turing. He said he was kind of reluctant. He didn't like it, but he said the statistical evidence for, at least for telepathy, is overwhelming, even if he didn't like it. So and we have some Nobel Prize winners in physics that have been very into this. At Cambridge, we have Brian Josephson. He won the Nobel Prizes in physics in 1973 on superconductivity. And he, if you go to his website, Cambridge University, he has links to articles about telepathy and psychokinesis. And he also once said that Britain was at the forefront of research on telepathy, and his colleagues in the say physicists guild chided him for that, and you know, said there's no such thing as telepathy. But Josephson defended his position say furiously, and so we have some quite great names in science. Also, in fact, last year's Nobel winner in physics, he is also a philosopher of mind, Sir Roger Penrose, and he has not written directly about the paranormal, but the guy he's developed his theories about mind with is an American anesthesiologist called Stuart Hameroff, and Hameroff has defended telepathy. You can find the videos with him on YouTube defending telepathy based on the, say, quantum non-locality and also other stuff like that. So as I said, if the Nobel Prize winner in physics, Penrose has said that he thinks their model allows for precognition, in fact. So it comes in, you will find it in the best of families. And I also like to refer to an article. The most prestigious journal in the world in psychology is the American Psychologist, which is released by APA, American Psychological Association. And in 2018, in the May issue, it was an article written by Professor Edsel Cardenio, who is a brilliant psychologist. He has written 300 scientific peer-reviewed articles, or contributed to that kind of articles, 300, and that's exceptional, really, or at least stunning. And Edsel Cardenio, he wrote these articles called The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena, a Review. And he concludes his articles with, yes, these phenomena are real, but no, we have not yet found a, say, model that everybody can agree on. But that the most prestigious journal in the world in psychology takes in an article, you know, saying these phenomena are real, it speaks volumes. So when people say there are no scientific evidence going in this direction, it's just BS with big B and big S, you know, because as I said, the world's most prestigious psychological journal prints articles in this direction. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that you bring out in your book is the US military experiments, or the CIA
Oh, yeah.
especially, and like the Stargate project. What would you like to explain about Stargate? Because not everybody will know about that here.
Yes, because conspiracy theories, I'm quite very down to earth Norwegian, and I'm not really into conspiracy theories or because the Christian youth club I went to, we imported some conspiracy theories from the United States, and they scared the heck out of me. And when I was, there's the number of the beast, and these codes on the milk bottles, this many lines, it was symbolic to be for Satan or whatever, So after having a couple of years with that frame of mind, I did like that. I will not be paranoid about anything like that, So I'm not easily hooked on conspiracy theories. What the military did, it could sound like a conspiracy theory, but from about 1975 to 1985, the military in the US conducted a program which is normally referred to under the umbrella Stargate. There were many projects researching different aspects of psychic phenomena, but the main idea was to can we use clairvoyance in say for espionage? Can we train spies that can use their clairvoyant abilities to, it was the Russians, of course, to direct, to observe the Russians when they are moving troops, when they are building new submarines that can go around, all the globe and all that kind of things. So to which extent is it possible that these phenomena can be developed to give reliable espionage information? So that was conducted and supported by the government for 20 years. And as I said, it could sound like a conspiracy, but it's not. You can go to the CIA website and download. Most of the project's material is released. It was, placed under secrecy until the project ended. Still, there are about as much as 20 to 30,000 pages not being publicly available. So, of course, you can still have lots of conspiracy fantasy about that, as I mentioned. But very many of the reports are available for everybody if they are interested. And I also written quite a lot of books about the projects by agents being there, and also physicists and officers. And everybody, I think, that was involved in this project concludes that, yes, these phenomena are real, but are they reliable enough that you can conduct big military operations based on them? There, of course, is... I think they found, most people, that it's difficult because when lots of lives are in the balance, as will be the case with military operations, you should have say more solid information than just psychic information, because even the best psychic can have very bad days on the job. They have slept bad that night, or or they can meet some issues or themes that somehow, where they have issues that does not make them neutrals. They can say be overly paranoid on something, or they can be perhaps a bit too naive about other things. So say risking 100,000 persons' lives just based on what a psychic tells you, you shouldn't do that. And that was also the official conclusion when they closed down the program. When they closed it, it was not a conclusion that saying that these phenomena are not real. Rather the opposite. It was made an official evaluation. Two professors, one was a skeptic, Ray Hyman, and the other was professors in statistics, Jessica Utz. And Jessica Utz concluded, yes, these phenomena are real, and what is called demands further investigation. Ray Hyman said that these experiments has resulted in something that is not explainable from, say, a normal view. But couldn't there have been some faults in the experiments? Could someone have cheated? And so he also recommended further research, but did not conclude that psychic phenomena were real, whereas Jessica Utz were more to that direction. That's saying this somehow is in line with what we have found in other laboratories doing serious research, rigorous research on this. So she concluded that they were real. Hyman said it's not real necessarily. It could be fraud, could be false here, but we should go on in this direction. But the committee making the final decision said, okay, might be real, might be not real, but we cannot move a troop of 100,000 soldiers based on this information. So therefore, we cannot continue the program as a kind of serious military effort. So that is the essence of Stargate. And if you should say, apart from my book, which is excellent, the chapter, and there is books by Russell Targ. He was a physicist working within the program. As an educated physicist, he was an expert on lasers and had done had assignments with NASA, the space agency. So his books is very recommended if you want to get closer to Stargate.
I mean, we're quite interested in conspiracies here, but of course, as soon as you call something Stargate, that suggests alien stars. Why do you think they called it Stargate?
Well, it goes in with, fits very nicely with the mythology, and also, quite recently, just a couple of months ago, or even 1 month ago, Pentagon released a report from their observations about UFOs. And they had 144 observations, and they found that only one of those could be explained by, say, conventional means. And the 143 others, they did not know how to explain. It could be aliens, could be some advanced, of course, weapon systems that was not available to public, and so. But there has also, and the Americans have been always, like that Flash Gordon in the 50s, and Star Trek and all that kind of series coming from there. So they have a, say, penchant for this kind of mythology because they were the leaders in science. So that's quite, so I feel it's a good name. So and also some of those involved in the project that is not were quite open to there being parallel worlds and alien civilizations. Say guys like Joe McMoneagle, for instance, he was one of the most famous viewers. I think he is somehow convinced that there are alien civilizations around also that can somehow say come into our worlds as well. So why not call it Stargate?
Okay. Well, I mean, I noticed in your book that you sort of briefly mention UFOs and ghosts, but on the whole, you focus more on, I think you say there's 5 main forms of psi phenomena. I'll just list them, which is, I think, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, telekinesis, and healing.
Right.
Now, some people struggle to see where, why is clairvoyance different to telepathy, for instance. Can you give us sort of an idea of how these differ and which ones you think have the most evidence to support them?
Yes, very good. Yes, just my book is basically, as you said, about psi, and I had to put a limit. There are still 540 pages, is quite a lot. So, and what say divides psi from other paranormal phenomena is the essence is that it's somehow created by, it seems to be created mainly by human will and abilities. You have clairvoyance, you have healers, it's you don't need aliens, ghosts. I don't see that, I don't say that aliens do not exist or ghosts do not exist. That is not, I write a bit about spirits and such things, but you can be a healer without believing in aliens, and you can also be a good psychic without, say, believing in ghosts. So I focus on the human aspect of this, and this is also because I feel it's important, because I think it's possible to some extent to develop these abilities for everybody. As I said, it's a kind of our basic consciousness is really telepathically connected to all other humans, also perhaps animals and even plants. So I like that because I will come to your question, but to just give the big framework here. I feel somehow if you're too much into conspiracies, then you somehow lose own agency. Oh, it's on the Pleiades; they are powerful and they can do lots of things with our world, you know. And might be not. But you know, what can you do for your own quality of life and for the quality of the planet, the quality of your friends and family and all that? And I think, you know, if you develop sensitivity towards these things that we just you just mentioned, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, telekinesis, and healing, that will benefit your own life quite a lot. It could benefit your own life quite a lot. And also, if you become more sensitive to the needs of others around you, and you could perhaps even become a healer. So I'm interested in what gives us as humans agency. I will not talk dismissive about alien civilizations, but what we primarily can do and act upon is our own life. So therefore, I have the focus on what we can do with our things, and not what the aliens may do with their spaceships or that kind of things. This very telepathy is a very common experience. Rupert Sheldrake has done quite a lot of experiment with that. For instance, telephone telepathy. Many have had the experience that suddenly you start thinking of a friend that you have not met for months, for instance, even years. And you're thinking of that friend, thinking of that friend, and suddenly 2 hours later, he calls you. And that has happened quite a lot. And then you think perhaps, oh, strange coincidence, but could it be telepathy? And Rupert Sheldrake, he has tested this out. And the essence of the experiment is that he gives, if you have, say, 4 friends, they get a mobile phone, and they will, from their location, they will call you. And of course, you are not looking on the screen, but by guessing, you are supposed to guess correctly who is calling. And since it's 4 friends, the statistics says you should be correct in about 25, 1 out of 4 cases, 25%. But what Sheldrake found, that is, people tend to be more like 40% correct. And that's extremely significant. And that is not just Sheldrake. This experiment has also been conducted at University of Amsterdam and the University of, in Netherlands, and University of Freiburg in Deutschland, Germany. So it seems to be supported with quite a lot of easy available evidence, this experience of telepathy that many people have. When it comes to clairvoyance, it's possible to, as I said, there Stargate we could use as a reference. There are lots of reports there, and people can go in my book and find links to this, and you can see soldiers or remote viewers are asked to imagine a site with strong visual identity. And you can see it time after time, they will be able to quite correctly describe this, say, site. There will be a researcher going to this site, and then they ask the spy or the remote viewer to please describe this site, and also make a drawing of this site. And I have given links where people can go and see these reports and see the drawings, and you will see it's stunning resemblance, what drawing they make and description they make, and the site they were asked to describe. So clairvoyance has also substantial evidence. And then it's precognition. Dean Radin, probably the world's most famous psychologist today, have done good experiments with precognition. He has had people in front of a screen, and on the screen, it will be shown pictures. There will be neutral pictures, there will be pleasant pictures, and there will be shocking pictures. And what is very interesting, and he wires his subjects with, you can say, measure stress levels, heartbeats, and sweat responses, and all that kind of bodily responses. And what is interesting, that about 3 to 4, 5 seconds before, say, a shocking image will appear on the screen, the bodily responses are there. So clearly, the organism is preparing, or by precognition, reading that a shocking picture is about to appear on the screen. And it's not possible by any normal means to explain that. You could say, oh, Radin is a fraud and he's paid people to blah, 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 all that. Radin did that experiment also with a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, Kary Mullis, who has been very, one of the, say, founding fathers of reading DNAs and all that stuff. And Kary Mullis has also written about these experiments, and he says, it was crazy. I was able to see 3 seconds into the future. It shouldn't be possible. It says there's something about time and consciousness we do not yet know. So also, just to make this in fast and furious, also precognition has solid, say, foundation in scientific experiments. Telekinesis, very interesting things. Should I go on, or should I take a break here?
No, you can carry on, please do.
Okay, yeah. Telekinesis, what is most easy to experiment there is probably with influencing computers. And there was a senior engineer, Helmut Schmidt, at Boeing, this plane factory in US. He went into this research, and he found he had a random event generator. It would, to make it simple, it could come up a green blink or a red blink. And because it was randomized from the computer, you should expect 50-50 greens and 50-50, red blinks. So he gave his subjects the instruction, try to make, say, more green blinks appear on the screen than red ones. And what he found, it was possible to say, alter the distribution in the wished for direction with 1 to 2%. And if you, of course, have you run 10 series of experiments, that is insignificant. But if you run hundreds and thousands of experiments and still get 1 to 2% more in the wished for directions, that is very significant. And that was what Helmut Schmidt did. Also, newer things, when you have quantum physics experiments, you have they have many versions of this, but if you fire electrons, this double split experiment in quantum physics, you have a wall, and you have 2, say, slots in this wall, and you bombard with electrons, and you get a kind of distribution pattern on the wall behind. And that is dependent. It is a long, complex theory around this, and so I will not go into it, partly because I'm not a physicist, and also because it's not really relevant for the experiment here. The point is to somehow direct again the distribution of the electrons, because if you can make more of them go to one slot than the other, then it will somehow alter the pattern you see on the wall behind. And Dean Radin has found that that is possible and written articles about that. So there you have also for say, that is kind of telekinesis in a micro world. So both these blinks on the screen with Helmut Schmidt, and also this this twist on a quantum experiment by Dean Radin, seems its intention and will has make via telekinesis influences matter. And when it's to healing, I can mention there's a very famous experiment called the Hawaii experiment. Then they had 11 healers. It was conducted in a hospital in Hawaii with the most modern brain scanning equipment and so. And conducted by a doctor in psychology called Achterberg. I don't know how they pronounce it. Achterberg, probably in the US. And she had 11 healers, and from different traditions, Kahuna and Tai Chi and shamanistic healings and so on. And they were to pick a subject, and this subject was placed in a brain scanner. And then the healer, sitting in a totally shielded room, also electronically shielded, so it was not possible to use any kind of spy devices to botch up the experience that way, or make fake good results or anything. So and then the healer was to send good vibes to the subject into this brain scanner. And what Dr. Artenberg said, that you could see on, I think it was 9 out of 11 cases, the patient's brain were lighting up as Christmas trees. So clearly the intention of the healer was affecting the brain wave pattern of the patient. It was not a long-lasting experience, so they did not evaluate whether or not health conditions improved by this, but clearly say the basic condition for doing distant healing was in place, that the intention of the healer was able to say change the brain wave patterns of the patients or the subject within this big fMRI scanner of the brain. So there you have some evidence for all the 5 basic psi phenomena. And all of this, I give so many links in my books, and I hopefully also presenting in, I'm not first, my English is not my first language. So my book is far better literary than my speaking.
You're doing very well. And I mean, you mentioned quantum phenomena there. What I always find interesting is the world of quantum physics will tell you that particles can be entangled, one can be in communication with that one over there with no visible means, and so on. But then in the next breath, they're very reluctant to say that that could ever be anything to do with telepathy. That they'll often then sort of dismiss psi phenomena and say that's nothing to do with quantum because that can't operate at a macro level. But I don't understand that attitude. I mean, why do you think they're so reluctant to say there could be a link?
It is, again, the emperor's wrath. If they say so, they will lose scholarship, they will lose prestige and everything, Right. And also what is called which everybody uses these days, the concept of paradigm. If you are within a paradigm, you have some kind of basic premises for what is the playbook of my science. And if you make a breach with that, that is problematic also theoretically. You might have you have perhaps written 10 books where you have based your research on the old paradigm. So the concept of paradigm, I can tell a little bit about that. It is basically, it was taken from grammar, but it was used by the historian of science called Thomas Kuhn. I think his first version, it was a book written early in the 60s. I don't remember if it's 60 or 62. It's called The Structure of the Scientific Revolutions. And Kuhn goes into history of science and see what is necessary, what happens when there is great revolution in science. This book is extremely famous, as it's at least 4 later editions has been released. And he found that, say, contrary to popular opinion, it's kind of also a debate he had indirectly or directly with Karl Popper, also earlier, let's say, philosopher of science. He said that science is characterized by people being willing to let their hypothesis fall if something contradicts this. That is the true scientific attitude. Whereas an astrologer just looking for confirmation, a true scientist is looking for falsification. What is, say, what is contrary to my theory or hypothesis. But Kuhn says, no. If you look at the history, that is not, the scientists are just as eager as the astrologer to keep, because they love their hypothesis. They have invested so much of their identity and work in this. So they will, cling to their hypothesis as long as possible. But what happens if you suddenly get a little phenomena that is not, say, do not fit well with the prevalent theory, and then you make a footnote about that. Okay, probably unimportant, but I make a note about it. And then it will become more and more footnotes, anomalies, that is the word Kuhn uses. They do not fit with the norms, with the law here. And when the heap of anomalies has grown big enough, then suddenly the paradigm more or less explodes, and then you get a new paradigm. But until then, after what Kuhn says, the researchers will cling to the old paradigm as long it's possible. It's like a drowning person climbing to a lifeboat in a way, but suddenly it's clear that it cannot be defended, and then you get a new. For instance, when Einstein came with his theory of relativity, I think it took 20 years before he was ridiculed, and was dismissed, and he was not a proper physicist. He was working at patent office when he launched his radical theory. So as I said, there is an irrational component also within science, which makes people cling to their beloved hypothesis and not being willing to let it go. They have too much vested interest. But it will happen when the heap of anomalies grows big enough. And as I said, this article in American Psychologist should be, say, an early warning, I think, that something is about to happen with this old paradigm here.
I mean, one of the things that I liked in your book, you were saying with laboratory experiments on, say, psi phenomena, you're trying to recreate something that might have had so many different circumstances. I think you liken it to trying to recreate a battle in a laboratory. But of course, there's so many variables. Getting all that to come together in one moment, again, is almost impossible. And yet, that's where a scientist or a skeptical one will go, well, there we are. It just goes to show it doesn't work. I mean, how do you get around that? I mean, do you just have to keep doing more and more laboratory experiments, like you say, just to get that 2%, that small percentage, which is an anomaly? Where do we go with that?
Very difficult, really. Dean Radin once told me that people tend to believe what they want to believe. So if they do not want to believe this, and also Brian Josephson said that some people are so skeptical, they would not believe in psi even if they know it was true. So because it does not fit. It does not fit with my worldview. So I have to get rid of these things. So Max Planck, who also was a pioneer in quantum physics, he said that science progresses funeral by funeral. So he was quite, he said the older generation who has invested so much in this old paradigm has to peacefully and calmly die away before we get this new paradigm shift. But of course, not everybody are totally. One of the most interesting parapsychologists today, he is not really a parapsychologist. He's a professor in psychology at Cornell University. That's Daryl Bem, and he was a skeptic, and he was even a magician. So he know all the, say, stage magic tricks, and you can even find tricks with him on YouTube. So Daryl Bem, professor, very famous for his research into some kind of gender identity things. I have not read that part of his science. But he found, reading statistics, going through the experiments, he found, oh, geez, this is real. And then he started to do his own experiments, confirming that, and even getting his research published in foremost journals. The most famous article is called "Feeling the Future." It's 9 experiments confirming the existence of, or say, substantiating the existence of precognition. Very interesting article. I go quite a lot into that, and very funny article also. He uses references which British people, I think, would like, to Alice in Wonderland and the White Queen and all that kind of things. So some people are being, among others, Professor Bem himself was convinced by, say, sound science in this field. I will say one experiment that was quite stunning to me, and say also was say convincing to me back in the day, was done by Professor Adrian Parker. He's an English professor in psychology, but he's tenured in Gothenburg in Sweden. And he made a stunning experiment with two twins. They were in the late 20s then, and they had the experience of having strong telepathic connection in many years. But of course, twins, they have quite similar genetics and also grown up in a similar milieu. Could it just be they were somehow synchronized by being, as I said, of the same stock genetically speaking, and also in the same milieu? And they wanted to find out. So Adrian Parker set up an experiment, and one sister, there was Sarah and Vicky, and one twin was in one laboratory, and the other, well, it was the same building, but a totally shielded room. And the one sister was wired just with the radiant experiment, measuring heartbeats, measuring sweat response, and all these kind of bodily functions. And the other sister had agreed to receive 4 mild shocks. And these shocks were to be delivered at randomized times. The point in time was chosen by a computer, so it was not possible to agree on beforehand anything. And what was stunning was when you gave one sister a shock, the meters on the other sister spiked. So clearly, they were so, say, entangled by distance, and it was not possible by any sound or hearing or vision or even not electronic transmission of information. Clearly, when shocking one sister, the meters on the other sister spiked. So when you can do that kind in a laboratory, that is, for me, was very convincing, and discussed its experiments with Adrian Parker, and we have mailed, and so I give say presentation of that experiment in my book. So sound science can convince at least some people.
I mean, you mentioned there that a chap was good at doing magic tricks. And of course, Uri Geller, who has had laboratory experiments. Now, you write about Uri Geller. I've met Uri Geller. He's an interesting man.
Yes.
But my feeling's always been that there is something real there, but he augments it with magic tricks.
Yes.
Now, mate, how do you feel about that? What do you think's going on with Geller?
I have the same feeling, and he has even confessed himself that he worked as an entertainer in the Israeli army when he was young, and then he did stage magic tricks. And also later, there was a video, I don't know if it's still available on YouTube, where you can see he was bending. He was a lady asked for demonstration, and you was grabbing a spoon, and when she was not seeing, he was bending it with his hands and not with his mind. So that is he has been taken also, doing some kind of tricks on occasions. That said, it's interesting because a friend of mine, he is quite famous film, what is called editor, within alternative, is made about UFOs and also about these crop circles. Terje Toftnes. Yes, he's won prizes for his films in the United States. And he was to meet Uri at an occasion, and his son had taken a teaspoon from their cupboard at home. So it was not a trick spoon or anything. Uri had the opportunity to touch or do some things with in beforehand. So after Terje had talked with Uri, he asked, my son has a little spoon here, can you do something with it? And Uri said yes to that. And Terje's son gave the spoon to Uri, who stroked it some, I don't know how long, but for some seconds and then gave it back to the son. And then when the son had the spoon in his hand, not in Uri's hand, but in the son's hand, then it started to bend. So that's quite stunning.
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think there's a mix of things going on there. Now, time is running short. I do want to just go to a few questions. I know. We've just got a few questions. There's a lady called Lynn here. She's asking, have you dealt with in your book information about psychic warnings of earthquakes and their locations, as well as significant happenings in the world like 9/11 train crashes, etc.? So is there something there that you'd like to say about people having sort of, again, precognition of big events?
It's very difficult the famous, quite famous Irish psychic Zach Martin has written a little book, Psychic Phenomena, 30 years ago or so. And he says the problem is if you call the airport and say, I see a plane crashing, they will dismiss you as a psychiatric patient, you know. So it's very difficult because you feel the responsibility. But I saw this plane crashing. Yes, take your medication. And so it's very difficult what you do. I have no clear answer to that, but you know, and also the strange phenomena is somehow if say you call the police about some terror attack, you see, probably it's not going to happen and they will dismiss you. If it happens, suddenly they will think, he knew about it. He is part of the planning group for this. So that can be, so it's very problematic. We have this global consciousness project at Princeton. I write a bit about that in the book. We have machines indicating a big movement in the force. But that is not precognition. It does more, say, register the buildup of the event. It's not pinpointing where things is about to happen. So it's difficult also because if you had machines doing the job, you could probably say you will not be declared insane or a terrorist. But the machines do not pinpoint where things is about to happen. So very difficult. And also Dean Radin has said you should never ponder precognition more than 10 minutes at a time because it hurts your brain. So even he, which is a great intellectual, you know, so it's so difficult. I write about some of the difficulties related to it, but I do not have any solution.
Okay. Now, Sonia asks, with telekinesis or maybe telepathy, to say, could some UFOs be operated by thought alone? Now, I think what she's alluding to there is some people who've claimed to have seen UFOs feel they've had a telepathic link with that. Yes. Have you come across that at all?
It's quite common, really. If you are to... if I am to recommend something, if you are to go into UFO seriously, you should read the books of Jacques Vallée. He is an astronomer. He made one of the first maps of March, data graphics, and he's you know, he's just great. He's made many of, or at least some of the algorithms, you know, laying beneath the internet. So, and he has also done some parapsychological experiments. And but this experience, as you said, it's quite common. It's very difficult to say. I saw a UFO myself once, and I felt there was some beginning connection, but then it disappeared, you know. Very difficult. As I said, my book is mainly about this basic phenomena and human to human, human to animal, and so because I somehow wanted to limit it to our world. It's Jacques Vallée says that these phenomena are quite common. And I will not at all dismiss, rather I would subscribe to much of Vallée's work. So it seems to be, but then again, if consciousness is a cosmic thing, as the old Vedanta philosopher says, aliens are no stranger to consciousness. Probably it's possible to do telepathic communication with people on the or people or beings or entities on the Pleiades or parallel universes. If consciousness is our, say, cosmic ocean we all swim into, you know, communication via consciousness is cosmic and ubiquitous. That is my take on it. So probably it's possible, but what are we to do about it? It is benefiting your life in a way, or is it being destructive? Some people, I discussed with a woman, she has been the feeling of being visited by aliens for many years, but it was scary to her. It is somehow threatening her normal life in a way. It was not possible to go on living, say, in a balanced way with all these visions or connections or communications with these aliens. So that is also how do you balance your life? And I like the Buddhist approach that you say these phenomena, and they do not dismiss the existence of other worlds, but what are our responsibility? Flights of fancy is are extremely interesting, and I've done lots of it myself. But somehow I was also suffering from depression and anxiety and attacks, and so I have to somehow rebuild my life and be very careful what creates balance. And as I said, going into therapy and all that kind of thing. So I'm even if I like kind of, as I say, flights of fancy, I also very practical. I want to improve my own and others' lives, and yeah. So I might not invest too much in say alien communication via telepathy.
Okay, well, thank you. David is just going back here to Rupert Sheldrake, who we interviewed here a year ago. And you mentioned him, of course. And what David is saying, you know, how does morphic resonance relate to the mental internet? Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yes, it relates perfectly well, I think, because Rupert's, and as we all know, I think Rupert is a strong defender of telepathy. It's more like my understanding of it is somehow that the morphic fields is, say, storehouses of information that earlier generations of different species have uploaded. And he does not use the T word, the telepathy word there, but the communication between, say, the crocodiles of today and the crocodiles of 1,000 years ago, it is there because their say behavior will be informed by the information in this morphic field. It's not telepathy one-to-one. I read my girlfriend's mind or something like that. It's more, so why don't you call it clairvoyance then? As I said, Rupert Sheldrake does not use the T word there. He used the words of morphic resonance, but it's somehow it's some of the same. It's sharing of information via the collective field of consciousness via the mental internet. It's very difficult to divide these phenomena all. I make also a point of that in my book, and even some psi researchers say deep down it's the same phenomenon, really. But some say place weight on the individual aspect, some place weight on the collective aspect. For instance, Stargate, if you wanted to know the plans of the Russians, you could use clairvoyance and see their troops moving, or you could use telepathy, tuning into, say, an important general. What are his plans for this see movement of troops? So I would say it's difficult, and even say some of the best researchers in the field say basic deep down is the same phenomenon.
Great, that makes sense. Jan says here, if you don't like the term conspiracy theory, maybe we could use alternative real processes as another word. That's one interest. And we have Roger here now. He's saying he believes there's a bit too much vested interest in believing in Einstein, which is an interesting thought because we've had a couple of speakers over the years who've questioned Einstein.
Oh, yes,
think,
yes.
I mean, do you feel that there could be something to that we need to rethink Einstein?
Yes, definitely. Einstein is not the end of things at all. I just used him as an example. It's I think it's a great progress from Newton to Einstein, but probably it's great progress to make everybody going into physics. They found that the great, say, little dirty secret in modern physics is that quantum physics and theory of relativity does not connect very well, because Einstein, for instance, did not believe in non-locality, and non-locality, as you said, is a very important explanatory model for certain phenomena in quantum physics. So as long as Einstein's theory does not allow for say non-locality, it cannot be the final theory about the universe. So it must, but still, you know, kudos to him because he made a great leap from Newton, you know, but it doesn't end there, of course. And I personally, I tend to like David Bohm's theory, you know, the universe as a hologram. So that is certain you take that, and you have also string theory and M theory that somehow tries to unite Einstein's theory with quantum physics. So as I said, Einstein is just one post in the big race here.
Okay, very good. And Adrian is saying, and this is a good one, right? So what can we do to develop our psychic abilities? Any suggestions?
Yes, my chapter 9 is full of suggestions. People should, you know, here's the teacher coming. People should do some kind of spiritual exercise. They should do yoga or meditation. Binaural beats, these tapes or audio triggering change of brainwaves can be very helpful. They should spend more time in silence and shut off their mobile phones. They should walk in nature and try to hug a tree or two, or, you know, tune into animals and all that kind, and listen and be more silent than our normal, say, modern pace of life usually allows for. So, as I said, some kind of spiritual or physical discipline or kind of things. Also, I would recommend, even if you're not in acute need of it, if you find a sound and say solid transpersonal therapist that is open to this perspective of see expanded consciousness research, that can be very helpful. I was lucky enough to go in therapy with an old woman, Gestalt therapist, and it was very interesting. She was very in tune with this. She had read Castaneda, you know, shamanistic literature, and she was a natural intuitive. So once on a cafe, on a friend, I discussed with a friend of mine the process with her, and so it was I think it was one Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and next time I went to her, I said, yeah, last week I spoke with my friend Svein and we discussed my therapeutical process with you. And she just waited a bit and she said, ah, was it at Wednesday at 12 o'clock? You know, so if you can meet a therapist like that, that can be very helpful.
Very helpful indeed. And look, we've got just a handful of minutes left here. So, I mean, like when we spoke to Rupert Sheldrake and some other people you've mentioned today, now they've all been attacked by skeptics. Have you come under any criticism or attack, or have they kind of left you alone because you're quite cautious in your book, not to say this is real? You kind of keep it in the middle, but have you had any sort of trouble there?
Not big trouble, because basically I'm a historian of ideas, you know, and I'm say. Of course I'm not, but you know, I in one way just the register of facts, you know, the neutral presenter of what has happened here, what has happened here, what has happened here, what's that happened here, and hopefully presenting in an accessible and funny way. So taking this, say, low-key approach has helped me in a way. But yeah, at first there have been more attacks from you know, skeptical family members and like that. My cousin, he used to be terrible, you know, but after I got some international success with the book, he's shut up because nobody wants to read his articles, but many want to read my books. But people have been kind to me. Even, you know, it in the Norwegian version was what is called reviewed in the Norwegian, the Journal of the Norwegian Medical Association, and they are definitely not New Agers. And it fared quite well with the professor in medicine, just because of this cautious approach I have. So as I said, just giving people the facts, making them draw their own conclusions. That because if you somehow try to push things to people, you get the gag reflex. So I had tried to, you know, make it innocent in a way. Also, a friend of mine, he's an anthroposophy. I don't know how.
That's always a tricky one, but we know what you mean.
Yeah. And he said, you are like a person pouring something into the drink of people when they're looking another way, and suddenly they drink and they found themselves intoxicated without having know it happened.
Very good way of putting it. And lastly, what's next for you? Have you got any other projects on the go?
You know, I feel somehow it's my project and duty to continue, you know, to promote the book, because you know, I'm not Bill Bryson or Eckhart Tolle. I do not have 10 people promoting my books, so I have to do it myself. So it's work to do, and probably next year or so, or even 2 years, I will do that. And also the book will arrive in Czech language later this year, and we also have it in a Spanish agency. They have not decided yet, but hopefully it will come in Spanish also. And then it will be more promotion if that happens. Latin America, 650 million people. So I really hope it comes in Spanish. It will be so delightful for me. As for books, I'm very interested in spirits and angels and that kind of things. And because some people I know have reported that to me. Of course, I've read lots of things about it, but I've not delved into it yet. So I could be interested in making a book about spirits and angels. That could be next project, intellectually speaking. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, look, you've been fantastic yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know you were worried about the language, but really,
yes.
you do not need to be. In fact, your English is probably better than many English people. So there we are. And I found that utterly fascinating, and I'm sure everybody else has as well. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot, Andy. And I hope also, if I may say some last words here, the book is, of course, lots of science, but it's also a lot of humor and anecdotes and good stories. And, so I'm trying also to be a bit spinner of yarns and raconteur as well. So it's not just sheer in science. There are no graphs, no statistics, matrices. It's more good stories with a little scientific twist.
Well, Terje, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.